السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد، رب يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. ربي زدني علما والحقني بالصالحين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. My dear respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and of course our fellow children, welcome you to this second of many parts, inshallah, in which we will discuss the Seerah inside out. Now, for those who are joining us first time, what does that mean? Seerah inside out means that we are going to take what we know from in the Seerah or what we learn from within the Seerah and bring it out and put it in perspective with the world that you and I live in. There's a reason behind doing that. If we were to merely read the Seerah and just say, okay, that's a good story, it's a good biography, it's a good description and explanation of our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we will compartmentalize it as a subject. We will put the Quran as a subject, again, another compartment in our brains, and then we'll try to live our own lives. When in reality, the Seerah and the Quran are actually sent to us, like we have the knowledge of the Seerah through the Hadith, and we have the Quran, of course, revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we can bring them in perspective to the world that we live in today. And if you were to do that, then and only then will you be able to realize that there is hope, there is solace in the divine text, in the divine scriptures, because it has been demonstrated to us that you can get through these things if you follow the way of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. That verily for you in the example of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a perfect example. In the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a perfect example. لِمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو اللَّهَ وَالْيَوْمَ الْآخِرَةَ وَذَكَرَ اللَّهَ كَثِيرًا. But who would actually find that example to be perfect? The one who aspires for Allah, who hopes for Allah and the final day, and thus remembers Allah abundantly. The reason I can turn to Allah and resort to Allah, I'm not giving an example, I'm not saying I'm the worst of all of us here. The only reason that a person can turn to Allah and resort to Allah and hope from Allah and cling on to Allah is because the person truly believes that Allah can do. One is believing in the sense of knowing, and one is the belief that's in the sense of there is no other resort. And so I think it's due time that we all should want an answer for our predicaments and a way out, a blueprint, something that shows that truly this is possible. And for that, we are doing Seerah inside out. For those of us who participated last week, we began this discussion of Seerah on the premise that we want to understand what was the true situation in the world at that time. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you out there, this is my personal thing right now. I have been off allergy medicines for 3 days now, and today's the worst of them. And I'm trying to get off of them because I've been taking them daily. And I know the allergy season right now is the worst, but it's really burning my eyes. And I'm trying to do local honey to try to beat it. So alhamdulillah, I'm semi-successful, and so forgive me for looking like this. It's just really painful, but alhamdulillah, I'm just trying to wean off my dependency on these allergy medicines. But nevertheless, what was the situation on the ground globally? I want you to understand it wasn't like the world was hunky-dory and only Arabia and a small area was messed up and the Prophet ﷺ came and fixed it. No, you will learn today, as you learned last week, and inshallah you'll learn in the fourth and upcoming week, that the world was truly a mess. And it was only considered a mess when you and I read about it. Sad reality is the mess in the world became normal. It became the norm. And when we read these things, sisters and brothers, ask yourselves, Do we even consider this to be alarming, disturbing in our society, or is it the norm? For example, we hear of robberies, the norm. We hear of people dying in car accidents, it's the norm. We hear about people getting murdered, it's the norm. We hear about people who commit high level crimes, it's the norm. We hear about people who engage in war and kill people, it's the norm. We don't feel startled, we don't feel scared, we don't feel angry, we don't feel frustrated. Why? Because it's the norm. It's become the norm. And so if you're to take the norm and ask yourself, what does a real world look like? I'm confident you'll see a stark difference between the two. There's going to be a vast difference between the two of them. The question then becomes, what do you want to do? Do you want to become of normalizing the norm, or do you want to become of those who will turn back and re-normalize what true normal is? And so that's what the Seerah gives us hope. The Prophet ﷺ was born in a land which the actions of the people frustrated him. But that wasn't just Arabia, that wasn't just Hijaz, that was so much more. And so right now we're discussing the people of Arabia, what they were up to. And the last two things that we discussed, we discussed about their warfare and plunder and theft. And an example was given of how these things were widespread in Arabia. We're still stuck in Arabia. We're going to go forward very soon, inshallah. Without further ado, let's go on to the next of many negative traits that were normal in Arabia. The fourth of which is cruelty. The people in general were unsympathetic to each other since they were preoccupied with unethical activities like theft, robbery, and heroic activities like warfare, which made them harsh in behavior. They would enjoy roast meat or kebab from this piece of meat of the camel's back and of the sheep's meat of both the sides of its tail. They would cut the piece of meat from the living camel or sheep without consideration to the suffering of the animals. Wow. Look at that. Subhanallah. How disgusting. They were so cruel as humans. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran speaks about the heart. And when the heart becomes hard, what the end result is. And Allah gives a similitude, an example. وَإِنَّ مِنَ الْحِجَارَةِ لَمَا يَتَفَجَّرُ مِنْهُ الْأَنْهَارُ. There are some rocks from which the rivers flow from. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا لَمَا يَشَّقَّقُ. There's some of the stones that break. فَيَخْرُجُ مِنْهُ الْمَاءُ. And water then proceeds forth from it. وَإِنَّ مِنْهَا. And from the hearts there are some لَمَا يَهْبِطُ مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. That they fall with the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The heart was given the example as a stone. And the stone becomes the heart when people become so cruel. They become so distant. They don't care. How many of us understand the strength and power behind the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he stated, to love for your brother what you love for yourself. A person is not a believer until they love for their fellow brethren what they love for themselves. How much do I truly love for others that I would love for myself? Go a step back. How much do I even love for myself? Nowadays, self-care is non-existent. People don't care about themselves. They don't care about their lives. People many times curse themselves and say, I wish I died. Na'udhu billah. It's a very, very sad state of affair. When you feel that you're no good and death is the best thing for you, you've already lost that love and you've become cruel to yourself. Then that cruelty will only continue to multiply to those around you. So one of the acts of cruelty of the people of that time is that they would cut pieces of meat from a live animal and they would eat it. And they wouldn't even care about the pain that they've inflicted upon these animals. May Allah forgive us. This is actually practices happening in our world today. Animal cruelty and animal abuse. As much as we talk about, oh, what about children and spouses? Yes, this is a systematic trend. It's gone so far beyond families and spouses and parents and everyone else that abuse has now infiltrated the realm of animals also. They used to practice to hit the breast of any living animal through target practice with arrows. Very clear cut what they're doing. Very demeaning, very animal, barbaric what they would do. They would cut the belly of pregnant women captured in war and kill the unborn babies. Stories like this emerged from the Gujarat massacre, which occurred back in the early 2000s. This is exactly what they did also. They would cut the ears, nose, and other organs of enemies killed in wars, and the woman used organs as ornament. This is so low. Not only would they fight in wars, but then they would cut the organs of the people they killed in war, and the women would wear it as ornaments. And you're like, how nasty is that? Well, guess what? That was the norm. That was the norm. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what has become the norm in our societies? When police officers just shoot and kill in many places without question asked, that's become the norm. But wasn't it to serve and to protect? So where did we go wrong? This is the frustration that you need to create in yourself, because that was the frustration the Prophet Muhammad had. Well, what am I going to do with that frustration, Imam? Am I going to become violent? No. When you become frustrated with the status quo and then you turn to Allah and you cry to Allah, Allah will then guide you to be the solution, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided the Prophet Muhammad by sending forth the solution. The Prophet Muhammad became a prophet. You will become a messenger of the Prophet Muhammad. You will become the representative of the Prophet Muhammad. You will do what you can do in your limited realm, and Allah will make your words and your actions have a global impact. You just have to care. The Prophet ﷺ, he cared. Do you and I care? That's what I used to say in my khutbahs in the masjid. We talked about an array of issues, and I would ask us all of how much do we really care about this? Do these things even impact us? Does poverty and hunger impact us? Does it hurt me? Does it disrupt my life? Do I feel upset about these things? Or am I like business as usual? If they're poor, they're dying, that's their fault. Well, I need to take care of myself. I'm perfectly fine, so I don't care. Now, that wasn't the demeanor of the Prophet Muhammad. So for you to understand the demeanor of the Prophet Muhammad and appreciate it, you need to understand the circumstances and the situations he was up against. It's written that they also opened the breast of dead enemies and brought out the liver and chewed it as a mark of hatred. Isn't that what happened to Hamza radiallahu anh, the Prophet's uncle? Some people would also promise to drink wine in the skull if he could kill him. With a view to punishing an enemy, they would tie up the two legs to two branches of a tree by bending them from opposite direction, and finally when they would let loose the branches, the result would be that the body would divide into two separate pieces all of a sudden, and that's nasty. They'd push two trees forward and tie up the person's legs and arms on the separate trees, and then they would let go, and when the trees go back to their normal state, the person's body would rip in half. If it was inquired to punish a woman, one of her legs would be tied with the tail of a horse, and the horse would cause to run in the stony land. Many accused persons were kept in a room without water and food. They would die out of hunger and thirst, without providing any food and drink. A camel would be kept tied on a grave till its death. They had a belief that the camel would be the carrier of the dead man in the next world. Look at these ignorant practices. A woman would be tied to the tail of a horse, which would make the horse run, and the horse would run and she'd be dragged along. A camel, a healthy, well-to-do camel, would be left on top of a grave, tied to die on it, not to eat or drink. So the belief was that this camel would die and its soul would reunite with the body of the deceased below it. Again, such crazy superstitious practices that they practice. And guess what? No one questioned it. You know why? Because it's the norm. See, the biggest problem we're fearing in our world today is that the people who question there are certain actions that are happening are silencing. They're either becoming silent or they're succumbing to the status quo. And if you succumb or you become silent and you're not the voice of reason, you're not the voice of truth, you're not the voice of justice, then let it be known you are going to be the reason why injustices will become solidified in our world. And as Muslims, Allah has created us not to support injustice. It doesn't mean you have to wage war. That's the difference between the Seerah and the Surah. The Seerah, it was never to go and fight these people. For 14 years, there was no fight. When they had the opportunity to fight, they didn't fight. Wars began when they didn't have the opportunity to fight because they had left the land. But the surah, the picture is that the so-called Islamic extremists present is you need to go kill anyone that you don't agree with. Our Islam is not about fighting people. Our Islam is about bringing forth reason to people. Now, that was the cruelty, a summary of the cruelty that occurred in that time. What else happened in that time? Before I move forward, ask yourself, what is the level of cruelty in our world today? I'm sure you could say there's something not too far away from it. We're still far. We haven't normalized such practices, but women abduction, child abduction, women abuse, it's all happening. It's all happening. Animals are being killed for fun. All these people go out to Alaska or they go to parts of Africa and they kill exotic rare animals and it's fun. So that's exactly what the days of ignorance was all about. If you understand what the days of ignorance were about, you will understand how far in ignorance we have come. And you'll understand then what the level of effort is needed to bring us back to the light that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ brought humanity back to. The sixth of many vices, adultery. Adultery was common and widespread. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh said, the adultery was done secretly, but they mentioned it in open gathering with pride. Imran al-Qais was a renowned poet in Arab. He was also a prince of the Kinda state. He mentions in detail about his affairs with Unayza, his cousin sister, and other women in his poem Qasida Lamia. He mentioned in a poem about how he would enter the rooms by confusing the gatekeeper and how he would rape these women, how he climbed up the tree with the clothing of the women. And this is, again, it's just so disgusting, and how he would make babies from these pregnant women. This is, again, disgusting to hear, but Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh relates this to us. This was what they were living in, my fellow brothers and sisters. This was the world. It was a nasty world. It was a disgusting world. One of the things the Prophet ﷺ teaches us is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates. Allah despises, He dislikes. That one of the servants commits a sin in darkness of night, and then Allah conceals it between them and the other person and Allah, and then they go about the next day bragging about it. Nowadays, it's become the norm in many workplaces, in schools, in our society, to brag about who they sleep with, who they meet with, who they go out with. And sisters and brothers, our children are being introduced to this vice from their very own Disney Channel and TV and whatever else they watch. If they've gone past Disney to MTV, whatever they're watching, this is exactly the vice that's being presented to them. You know what a normal society is? Sleep around. You know what a normal society is? Brag about doing it. This is exactly what's happening. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh says one of the most famous created poetry, the Qasida Lamia. He would talk about how he would sneak through and pass the guards of married women, and he would do these things, and then he would take their clothing and he would make them pregnant and do this. This is just, again, immoral. But my question is to you right now, what is morality? We live in such an immoral world. There is no sense of morality. We talk about lowering gaze. What does that mean? Lowering gaze isn't something that you do physically. You see a woman, you just look down. Lowering gaze means lower your carnal self and present your modest self to people. Many times in this society that we live in, because the norm is considered respectful to look at a person. Even if you look at a person, you look at them with respect. You don't look at them as they are a piece of meat, as they say in today's world. And that's exactly what it's become. There is no haya. There is no shame in our world today. And the reason why Rasulullah SAW came wasn't to bring forth a book, wasn't to bring forth a word. Matter of fact, it was through that word to rectify society, to make society whole and beautiful once more. But in 1400 years, our failure has become that our world has gone back to that carnal, disastrous, immoral state. If we haven't reached the depths and the lows that they had reached, I don't think we're too far out. And one of the things that we learn about the signs of the Day of Judgment is that people will commit adultery in the open on the streets. There's going to be no shame. There's going to be no shame. And matter of fact, every day that passes, that you and I disconnect from society because we want to save ourselves from society, we're allowing the society to become worse. Remember one thing, Rasulullah SAW never taught the people to leave society, run from society, seclude themselves in their cocoons and hope that the storm would pass or they would be punished and you would be saved. Aisha radiallahu anha asked the Prophet ﷺ about this day, and he said, Allah's punishment, when it comes, everyone will be wiped out. But then Allah will ask us on the Day of Judgment as to our actions and our intentions. So if you and I assume that we can just disconnect from society and make our own society, the Prophet ﷺ never did that. He, matter of fact, went into that same society and made it the right society. So that's why you and I need to understand what was happening in the world, starting with Arabia, so we understand and value the true mission of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. It said about the people who are prostitutes, they would wait in their houses by hoisting flags in front of their doors. The illegitimate children of the prostitutes were given equal status of other children. Even in pre-Islamic days, the prostitutes were available in Mecca. A companion of the Prophet ﷺ named Marsad approached him for marrying a prostitute woman named Anaq. At that time, the Quranic verses were revealed, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this in the Holy Quran, الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة والزانية لا ينكحها إلا زان أو مشرك وحرم ذلك على المؤمنين. A fornicator does not marry except a female fornicator, and a polytheist does not marry except a fornicator or a polytheist, and they have been made unlawful to the believers. The influential emirs and their countries ordered their women slaves to earn money by resorting to prostitution. Before the migration of the Prophet ﷺ to Medina, the people of Medina made Abdullah bin Ubay as their king and made a valuable royal crown with a view to putting it on his head. He had two women slaves named Musayka and Umayma. He forced them to prostitution and earned money out of it. In the context, the following verse was revealed: وَلَا تُكْرِهُ فَتَيَاتِكُمْ عَلَى الْبِغَاءِ. Do not force your maids to prostitution. There were a number of married customs in addition to existing system of marriage in Arab. They were as follows: the husband was permitted to own a wife and to have relationships with her in a very bad way. I'm going to pass through some of these words. When the girl became appropriate for marriage, she was permitted to have relationship with a number of youth. This stuff is all happening in our world. That's why we have to go through this. It's hard to hear, but we have to go through this. When the known prostitute gave birth to a child, it was called in, and he or she, with the help of Kiyafa, pointed that the child be born out of a particular person. This is just, again, choosing the illegitimate people to bring forth birth to the child that was born out of prostitution. This is, again, 3 pages of very hard words to hear, but this was the reality, my brothers and sisters. And if you don't like hearing it, I totally understand that. With all due respect, that's what's happening in our world today. That's what our children are being exposed to in our world today. Do not think for a second that they're living in a pure bubble. There's no more purity. And that takes us to the next vice, shamelessness. In the Arab, modesty was rarely a thing found. The uncivilized Arabs considered performing Hajj as an act of a virtuous deed. During the time of Hajj, lakhs of people, thousands and thousands of people gathered and moved around the Kaaba, except the people of the tribe of Quraysh. All the people made the tawaf of the Kaaba nakedly. They would walk around the Kaaba every year, seasonally. They worshipped their idols. They came together. It was a dual purpose. One was, of course, worshiping. One was business and trade. It was like an expo. But except for the people of Quraysh, everyone else who came from outside, the thousands of them, they would be walking around the Kaaba naked. Brothers and sisters, let me say something here. And this is something, inshallah, as we reflect, we rectify our actions. And this is only something I can say to you all because I cannot speak to the world right now, and I'm hoping that you can convey this message to your families. We have noticed a growing, alarming trend of our brothers and sisters as they go for Hajj nowadays, especially the more younger ones, that the type of clothing that they wear when they go to the house of Allah is very inappropriate for that place and for that time. From the types of t-shirts, the slogans, the tight jeans, the type of clothing they wear. Now, I agree to some sense that there's no Islamic clothing such as saris or long dresses or burqas. Like, there's no precise Islamic dress. We cannot say this is an Islamic dress and that is an Islamic dress. But what do we know about Islamic dress? Islamic dress is about modesty, and it is about humbleness. You wear clothing that doesn't make you arrogant or pride, and you wear clothing that covers your body and its shape in a modest manner. Clothing is always about modesty. So my question to you is, a lot of the people who are now starting to trickle in to the Hajj and Umrah, you will start to see a shift from the traditional kurtas or jubbas or long dresses, whatever it was, to very provocative type of dresses, both male and female. And this is very, very wrong. This is taking us back to the time when people used to make tawaf of the Kaaba naked. This was the shameless state of affairs at that time. It is said the women would also do the same by chanting a hymn. If anybody would give us clothes to cover our modesty, then they would recite the poem, اليوم يبدو بعضه أو كله فما بدأ منه فلا أحله. Today, full or part of my body will be naked, but I don't permit anybody to enjoy my nudity. Na'udhu billah. So when people say this, and this is so true, that why are you looking at me for? I can dress how I want. This is exactly what they were saying. I'm going to be fully or partially nude and don't look at myself. Well, why are you doing it for? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us about wearing the anklets, about women wearing anklets or perfume outside that would attract other people. It is a vice. In itself, that's a vice. And then we could say, well, why are you looking for, or why are you smelling for? Na'udhu billah, both are wrong. One isn't wrong. Both are wrong. And so this was what they would say. They took their bath openly in the people. They used to urinate and respond to the call of nature at open places. They used to mention in detail what they would do at their homes openly to people. After becoming owner of the stepmother as a heir after the father's death, the son forcibly used the stepmother as a wife. Na'udhu billah. Again, a really bad state of affair. They took the wife of the dead person as a commodity like other articles. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressed this in the Holy Quran. There's a reason why these verses were revealed. We are putting context to the reason behind it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la yahillu lakum an tarithu nisaa karha. O you who believe, you are forbidden to inherit women against their will. Women are not inheritance. If your father-in-law dies or your father dies, you can't take your mother or mother-in-law as an inheritance and use her how you will. Na'udhu billah, this happened. And na'udhu billah, it's starting to happen again in our world. In addition to that, what was the other things, the vices that happened? Violence against women. The distress of the women in society knew no bound. They did not get any share of their ancestral property. Only the male members had a right to the share of the ancestral property. The argument behind such practice was that only the people having the ability to fight in the battleground should inherit property. In this context, the children also were deprived of the share of their ancestral property. The victorious party in war would openly start their barbaric oppression against the women of the defeated party, and the same they would do except the woman with dignity returned in accordance with the treaty. Subhanallah. Not only were they venomous against the women of their own tribes, but if they were to defeat other people, because remember, war was rampant. All the world was about was war, 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 killing and fighting. That was what you slept for, and that's what you woke up to do. It was such a sad state of affair that even when they killed the opposite army, they would oppress and suppress and perpetrate violence against women. And the Prophet, of course, talked about how this was wrong. If a woman was divorced, she had no right to marry another person without the permission of her immediate past husband. Anyone could marry as many wives as they liked. There was no limitation in regard. Ghaylan Thaqafi radiallahu had 10 wives when he accepted Islam. Wahab Asadi radiallahu had 8 wives when he accepted Islam. They would marry 2 sisters at a time. The stepmothers had become the wives of the stepsons during the. So this is again no distinction, no distinction of human beings, and that is why, my fellow brothers and sisters, the Prophet Muhammad was given this revelation Quran of Surah Nisa, who is halal to marry and who's haram, and that's why it said up to 4, because there was such a destruction in society when it came to who they married, how many they married, how they married. The Quran had to break that trend down. And so we today, when we say, oh, you're allowed to marry 4 women, don't bring this in the context until you understand what was happening at that time. SubhanAllah, a woman would be kicked aside if she was at her menstrual period. She would be locked up with limited food and drink. Widows had to stay in a small dark room in gloomy dress for 1 year. At the expiry of 1 year, she was given a donkey or a goat and was required to do bad things with that animal. This is all in the history of our society, this disturbing society that was existing on this world at one time. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran said, وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ بِهِ أَيُمْسِكُهُ عَلَى هُونٍ أَمْ يَدُسُّهُ فِي التُّرَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this ill treatment towards women. Subhanallah, if you go to haram, inshallah we all will go very soon, and when you go to Allah's house, do not forget that on the left hand side towards the new buildings that are being built, where there are 2 roads cutting across, in the middle there's a medium. That medium is untouched. The reason is because that was the place they used to bury girls alive. This was how much disgust towards women occurred or existed in the society that once bragged about the valor and the strength of their soldiers who were born from mothers who gave birth to these so-called children, but these children had no regard for girls. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells that they used to bury them alive, and that is known as maqbara wa'dul banat, the graveyard of where girls were buried alive. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when the news of the birth of a female child is brought to any of them, their face becomes dark and he is filled with inward grief. He hides himself from people because of the evil of the whereof he has been informed. Shall he keep her with dishonor or bury her into the earth? This was the reality. If a person was told their wife was pregnant, oh, my wife is pregnant, we're going to have a soldier who's going to kill for us, and when they find out it was a girl, they would be so ashamed, they would hide their face from the people, and they'd be between 2 minds. Do they keep this girl and become dishonored, or do they just bury her alive? That was the world that they lived in. And my fellow brothers and sisters, we're not so far off, because even in our so-called Islamic cultures, the treatment towards girls in general, not wives, we're talking about just girls in general, this is a systematic trend of evilness and wickedness. The way women and girls are treated in our Islam today, culturally, not Islamically, the result of it is what we're seeing. A very distinction between male and female, sons and daughters. That goes to then husbands and wives. And that, of course, seeps into this evilness, seeps into father versus mother. This distinction was never what Islam wanted. Every human being should be treated with the same love and compassion as a human being. But they lost that at that time, and unfortunately, we're losing it in our society also. Abu Hamza was a respectable leader. His wife gave birth to a female child. Hearing the news, he left the house and hid himself in some outside place out of shame. His wife then used to sing a song in the efforts of making her daughter go to sleep. The song was Mali Abi Hamzata La Yatina ببيت يبيت في بيت التي تلينا غضبانا ألا نلد البنين تالله ما ذاك بأيدينا ونحن كالزرع لزراعينا تنبت ما قد زرعوه فينا. What happened to Abu Hamza? How does not come to us? He does not come to us, rather he sleeps in the night in the house of our neighbor. He has become annoyed because I did not give birth to a male child. By Allah, it is beyond my ability to give birth to a male child. We, the women, are like the fields. The same plant will grow out of the seed the husband sows in the field. So now the mother is singing the daughter to sleep with a song that she's telling her, your dad is shamed, your dad is sleeping at the neighbor's house, your dad doesn't want to come, he's blaming me because I gave birth to a girl. And subhanAllah, there's still this culture that exists in today's world, in Arabs and in Ajam, that you need to have boys. They're going to be your hearers. They're going to be your representatives. They're going to carry your name. They're going to carry your business. Do away with all that. Destroy all that. Who cares about our name? Our name is nothing if we are not known in Allah's court. Our property is nothing. Our children don't care about the businesses we establish. They'll do what they want to do. So what is this false, fantasy that people are living, sons over daughters? That's why Rasulullah taught us, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a person who has 3 daughters and raises them well, they're going to be his Jannah. A Sahabi asked 2, Ya Rasulullah, I said even 2. He re-established the honor and dignity and equality of Jannah that can be obtained, which is a greater outcome than what sons of that mindset can do for you in the world today. So subhanAllah, this was the result, that a female child after her birth was a source of shame. Not only were they shamed, but they buried their daughters alive. Such a tragic and abominable custom had widespread throughout Arabia. It is said in the tafsir that the Arabs buried their female child lively and in the apprehension that they will become poor to bear the expenses of food and dress for their daughters, and that the daughters will be a subject to imprisonment and oppression by their enemies, or that they would be dishonored by their husbands after marriage. They used to say that the angels are the daughters of Allah, so the daughters belong to Him. So it is useless to keep them alive. They should be sent to Allah by burying them alive. Na'udhu billah. Think about that. That is crazy. They would say that these daughters are only going to bear a lot of expense that we won't afford. That's an excuse. Or that if we were killed in war, our enemies would take our daughters and enslave them. Or if they were married, their husbands would use them. And that's why they created this solace in their mind that the angels are the daughters of Allah. And so Allah uses them how He wants. We'd rather kill our daughters and send them to Allah so that our daughters would become one of the angels that would be the daughters of Allah. Na'udhu billah. What a twisted mindset. And brothers and sisters, how many twisted mindsets in the name of faith exist in our world today? People are doing so many crazy things in the name of faith. They say, well, that's what our faith is about. Really? Is that what our faith is really about? That's why we need to go back to the Seerah. That is why we need to go back to the Seerah in order to get back to the Sunnah. And you can't go back to the Seerah and be inspired to go back on the Sunnah until or unless you understand when the Seerah happened and what impact the Seerah had, because the world was something much different, and that's exactly what we're learning. If anyone wanted to keep their daughter alive, they would send their daughter to grazing fields by wearing her woolen clothes. Otherwise, a father would dig a well in the field and tell his wife to prepare the daughter with fine dresses and perfume. I will take her to the house of your parents. Thereafter, he took her near the well and finally threw her in it, and he filled the well with mud. So again, such nasty practices, such false promises. Dress your daughter up. We're going to take her to your parents' house and she'll stay there. And he would take that dressed up daughter to a well, throw her inside, and just fill her up with dirt. Qais ibn Asim radiallahu ta'ala went to meet the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam after becoming Muslim. He said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he had buried his 8 daughters alive by himself. See, this is a beautiful thing about Islam. When we hear the stories of the Sahabas and their Islam and what happened pre-Islam, there's one silver lining here. That the remorse, the regret, the guilt that Islam brought about, this was wrong. And now you're realizing this was wrong. Before Islam, it was nothing wrong. It was the norm. But Islam brought back a sense of, Alhamdulillah. Islam brought back a sense of, Alhamdulillah. I don't think I could fight without allergy medicines for too long. May Allah give us all shifa. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. But the people who became Islam, the first thing Islam restored in them was a sense of humanity, a sense of civility, a sense of remorse, a sense of shame. That's one of the few things that you will see consistent with all those who embraced Islam. And they said about their days of ignorance. Why did they talk about the days of ignorance? Because Islam allowed them to see something better from those days. So he said he buried 8 of his daughters alive. It is said that Qais was asked whether he felt sympathy for his daughters. In reply, he said, "Yes, I felt seriously for a daughter. I threw the daughter into the ditch and tried to fill the ditch with mud. The body of the daughter was put into the mud up to her breast when she, with her hands, started throwing the mud from my beard. She said, 'My father, your beard is filled with mud.' At that time, I felt very much for my daughter, but I lost no time to bury her." He says one of the daughters he was burying, when he was burying her and she was up to here with dirt, I had dirt all over me, and her hands were still out, and she touched my beard and said, "Dad, you have dirt in your beard. Why do you have dirt in your beard?" And still, he went on and he buried her completely. Wayakum for participating, inshallah. We have another 10-15 minutes, inshallah. So please, if you can, stay with us. This is our weekly Seerah class. I want to expand it because we have a lot to cover and there's a lot of details in this. And why not? Because I think it's about time, in these times, that we understand what we can do. It's easy to tell a prince that they are from a royal family. It's hard to make a prince realize the value of the royal family. We all, brothers and sisters, are from the Ummah of Rasulullah Sallallahu. It's easy to say you're from the Ummah of Rasulullah Sallallahu. It's very hard to understand the value of who you are as an Ummati and a follower of Muhammad Sallallahu. And that's why we're doing this. That's why this is so much needed now, because you are the solution that the world is waiting for. Allah gave you and I Islam because we need to do what needs to be done. And that is going to be done with Allah's will. And Allah says in the Quran, وَإِن تَتَوَلَّوْا, if you turn back, يَسْتَبْدِلْ قَوْمًا غَيْرَكُمْ, Allah will change us out. He doesn't need me. I need Allah. So now I need to value what I have in appreciation to Allah, that I can do what needs to be done. And remember once more, it will be done, and it will be done without violence. You don't need more violence in this world. We don't need any Al-Qaedas and ISIS and Taliban. You don't need these people. World does not need violence. World needs love. World needs civility. World needs humanity. World needs sanity. And the world needs to be restored to goodness. And the Rasulullah Sallallahu did it in the right way. And you and I need to understand, as his followers, we all, 1.8 billion of us, need to do it the right way. So subhanAllah, he did this. And he says, at that time I felt very much for my daughter, but I lost no time to bury her alive. It is also said that Qais was asked to say whether he felt any sympathy for his daughters. He replied, yes, I felt seriously for my daughter. She was beautiful like the brightness of a full moon. Her laughing was pleasant and words were very sweet. In a word, she was incomparable in beauty and qualities. When I threw her into a ditch, she cried and said, "What wrong I did, O father? Why are you throwing me into the ditch mercilessly?" I had nothing to answer for her. I filled the ditch with mud in a hurry, and the daughter became vanished within the ditch. Qais accepted Islam, and so he openly told everything to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with a view to freeing himself from all his past sins. It was not only Qais who involved himself in such an abominable act. There were hundreds and thousands of people who, for the sake of their aristocratic dignity, used to bury their female children alive. He wasn't the only one. Hundreds and thousands of the people of Arab pre-Islam did this. There were some noble and generous people in the society who were against such a bad practice. In fact, they hated it. After becoming Muslim, a man named Sa'sa met the Prophet ﷺ and told him, "During the age of ignorance, I set free 360 female children from being buried alive. For this purpose, I had to give 3 camels for each of the female child." Subhanallah. Sa'sa radiallahu anh said that my goal in life before I became a Muslim was to get these daughters, basically buy them from their parents, so that the parents wouldn't bury them alive, and I freed them. How many, everyone? 360 of them. And for each of these daughters, I paid the price of 3 camels each. So 360 times 3. That's 1,020 camels he gave away of his money, not to enslave these girls, but to free them. And he's telling this story to the Prophet ﷺ after embracing Islam. My fellow readers, the author says, have you ever seen or heard about the atrocity of any creature or animal towards its innocent child? It is the men who did it, and then they did it to these female children, to their female children. It was not an easy task to mount the inhuman character of the people of the Arabs and made them civilized, but it is a historical fact that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made them not only civilized in comparison to all other civilized people, but also molded their character equal to the divine angels. The Arab people became a model of modesty, a model of sincerity, a model of honesty and fraternity throughout the world. The Prophet ﷺ was able to change these same people to become models and example of goodness. Why are you and I hesitant to become those models and then to make the world that model? Every person out there in society is waiting for you to make them into the model of goodness. It is in the absence of the goodness that weeds grow on the grass. It is in the absence of our care that weeds are growing in our society. So do not think for a single second that is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Everything is possible by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us complete, inshallah, with one more of the many vices. Yes, the history is going to take a few days, and we're going to go through all the history. We're not here to bash the Arabs or the Chinese or the Indians or the Persians. These are the histories we're going to read about. We're here to understand the status quo in the world that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was sent as a rahmatul lil alameen towards. He wasn't sent as a punishment to the world. He wasn't sent as a dictator to the world. Na'udhu billah. He was sent as mercy. All our world needs right now isn't more laws, isn't more armies, isn't more weapons, isn't more murder. All our world needs right now is love. And through giving that love, you will create an understanding, you will restore civility and sanity, and you will make human beings human once more. That's what the Seerah is here for. So the final vice that we'll cover today, in respect of time, because I have to teach the Hifz class in a few minutes. So I thank you all who have participated. And I understand some of what we talked today seem to be out of place for modesty, morality. Well, my dear brothers and sisters, this was the history of pre-Islam Arabia, and there's nothing immoral in discussing the facts. And if you try to hide from the facts, know that your children are drowning in the same facts in our society. There's no safe haven anymore. There's no safe space anymore. Our world is only plagued. As we are plagued by COVID-19, we are plagued by immorality. So if there's an intention we should make at this time, is the intention to become civil and to restore civility, to dress nicely and to help society honor their bodies, is to create an atmosphere of healthy relationships. Our Islam believes in healthy relationships, my brothers and sisters. We want healthy relationships. There should be marriages. There should be couples. There should be love. There should be happiness. We need to create that, not succumb to all this overnight dating and going out and then bragging about it in illegitimate relationships. This is what our world is about. We've already been plagued by these things. So don't think COVID-19 is the first plague. Our spirituality has already been plagued by all these things. So last thing I'll finish with, because it's almost time for the next class, it's called meanness. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all the believers and keep all the believers in good hands and safety. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Beautiful dua. So I'll finish with this because the next class is about to begin, and that's called meanness. The Arab people used to eat all kinds of food without considering it's good or bad, and cure us. Yeah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all and cure us from this. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair for that dua. The Arab people used to eat all kinds of food without considering it good or bad aspect. Their common food was insect, birds, and all kinds of reptile. They also used to eat iguana, chameleons, lizards, small house lizards, and other hated creatures. They were habituated to eating clots of blood, hide of animals after burning it, meat of the dead bodies of a donkey and a swine, and cut the limbs of animals who were alive and taking their limbs as food. They would kill the domestic and ferocious animals and birds by beating them with sticks, by tearing the neck or the throat and then eating their meat. They also ate the flesh of the animals killed by other animals. They would free the bull, goat, hen, and other animals in the name of their imaginary deities and consider as forbidden to eat these meat. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل لغير الله به والمنخنقة والموقوذة والمتردية والنطيحة وما أكل السبع إلا ما ذكيتم وما ذبح على النصب. There's a reason why these verses are revealed. Forbidden to you are for food are the dead animals, the blood of flesh or swine, and that on which Allah's name had not been mentioned while slaughtering, and that which has been killed by strangling or by violent blow or by the headlong fall or by being gored to death, that which has been partially eaten by wild animal unless you are able to slaughter it, and that which has been sacrificed on stone altars. So sisters and brothers, another sense of why they were so barbaric, because the food, the way they ate and what they ate made them into this uncivilized people. What don't we eat in our world today? People in Florida eat alligator. People around America eat frog legs. People eat bugs, and it's just nasty. Well, when you have no distinction in what you eat, you become what you eat. As we say in this country, you are what you eat. So we are continuing a very long journey into the Seerah. And the whole goal is Seerah inside out. It's time to take it out of the book, apply it into the real world scenario. Stop having this fantasy and dream. The world is all good. It was bad at that time and Rasulullah took care of it. How bad was it? What did he truly confront? What did he change? How Allah helped to make the change? It's time for you and I to value that. So Jazakumullah khairan to all of you for this beautiful 1 hour of conversation and connection. The Seerah is a beautiful reminder at the times we're in, and we have to ask Allah, rectify us so that He may use us so that we can make the world better. If Allah does not rectify us, and if we don't seek rectification, and if Allah doesn't use us, as Allah said in the Quran, He will change us out. May Allah not do that to us. May Allah not change us out. May Allah rather make us the good people that would become the change that's needed in this world. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Thank you to all of you. Jazakumullah khairan to all of you. So nice to be with you this afternoon. And inshallah, we'll continue to be together in the days to come. Remember, we are here for you. Anything we can do, please let us know. Jazakumullah khairan. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen to everyone's du'as. We will see you all soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.